a 93% cut in shoreside infrastructure, facilities, aids, navigation, and housing. So if we enact the budget as is, it'll be impossible for the Coast Guard to address the current $460 million backlog in shoreside infrastructure that you've prioritized. So I'm just wondering how shoreside infrastructure fits into your priorities if we're sending folks off on state-of-the-art platforms and coming home to infrastructure that's literally falling apart in some places. How can you always be ready if that's the case? Can you try to address that for me?
Yes, sir, I'm happy to do that. So investing in shore infrastructure is one of my top priorities. Rebuilding, the Coast Guard's crumbling buildings, training centers, our classrooms and our barracks, our housing, our shoreside facilities like our piers and our boat lift facilities and our covered moorings. Those aren't just good for the Coast Guard, that's good for America because that creates construction jobs and communities across the nation. So I'm passionate about reinvesting in our infrastructure. As you know, we've had to make the tough trade-off decisions over the years of decremental budget environments, and often shore was where we made that trade-off as we wanted to keep hot production lines running with the capital assets we've been talking about thus far. Now, you've heard the Commandant say we need to rebuild and repair and modernize the Coast Guard, invest in our modernization, invest in our infrastructure. We do have a $1.6 billion backlog in our shore construction account and a $700 million backlog in our maintenance account. And what we need to do to get at that is we need to have a $2 billion CIP, capital investment plan. Right. We need to have the 5% O&M funding per year that's going to get at that $700 million backlog and continue the maintenance we need to do, the preventative maintenance that has to keep these assets available because they're what support our operations and our people, not just the operations, but the people who run them.
So it sounds like you've not only run the numbers that we see today, but you've run the numbers out, 5 to 10 years to play catch-up as well. So if that is the case, then, well, how are these tough trade-offs being made, knowing full well that that the end result is that we have shoreside facilities that are really not in a position to support all these great new platforms, and they are great and they'll be new, these great new platforms that they're supposed to support? What discussion's taking place inside the Coast Guard, inside DHS, and inside OMB on this?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. And I want to thank the Congress for supporting our major acquisition shore infrastructure funding that gets tied to our new ships and aircraft, and that has been funded. So you'll see when we have a home port where we're clustering our cutters, we are getting the money, and that's usually tens of millions of dollars per port to build out that infrastructure. So we're doing that. We're rebuilding from hurricanes. Thank you for the $15 million down payment on our $90 million damage assessment for Hurricane Matthew. Yeah. But it's the other routine, recurring, our training centers, the other facilities that fall into the backlog, that there isn't any room left at the table once you've funded all that, and then you've looked at those. Like I said, the production lines always trumps the infrastructure that we say we can get at that tomorrow, and we're waiting for that day, and that's why we need the $2 billion SIP.
Yeah. Again, I don't know which one of you could answer this, but on the on the OPC timelines, and this is sort of the opposite of the discussion we just had, sort of this discussion about where you put your money. Even with service life extension providing up to 15 additional years to the existing medium endurance cutter fleet, you're looking at anywhere from a 2 to 5 year gap for your OPC replacement for your nearly 1-to-1 replacement. So does that mean are we anticipating seeing service life extensions going 17 years to 20 years, or are we going to accept a gap on those replacement timelines?
Congressman, what we're going to do on there is, you'll see that chart the GAO submitted is a great chart. There's only about a 2 to 5 year gap, as you said.
Right, and depending on the OPC.
Sir.
Yeah, right, yeah.
When they come off their service life, and, well, we do love those 50-year-old cutters, so that, if we stretch those to 50 years, we'll be able to close that gap, sir. So we do plan on making sure those cutters, those 270-foot cutters, last until the offshore patrol cutters come online.
I'm sorry, are you saying that your plan then is not to allow those gaps?
No, sir, we're not going to allow those gaps.
Is that right? Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the gentleman. I'd now like to recognize Mr. Lewis from Minnesota, the Vice Chairman of the subcommittee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank everyone for coming today and your presence here. I want to talk a little bit about the administration's proposal and prioritization and everything we're supposed to do here. Ms.